I'm Mike Malio. I'm an origin hunter. And tonight we're going to be talking about mastering search, finding your genealogy records. Thank you, Southborough Genealogy Club, for inviting me. So we're here in the Southborough Public Library. I have been researching genealogy for 25 years. I'm sitting on top of about 100 years worth of genealogy. I'm basically standing on the shoulders of giants. I'm sort of a third generation genealogist in that my father-in-law was a genealogist for a number of years, and he got all of his start from his own aunt, Mary French Cheney, and she started about 1900 even. I'm an IT guy, so I've also been doing information technology work for just as many years. I have a background in corporate intelligence and business intelligence, and there's a little bit of oxymoron there. And the reason I mention it is that when I was doing this, this is back in the late 90s, early 2000s, I was doing corporate intelligence. It's all about searching your competitors. You know, what are they leaving open for investigation? So I did a lot of work finding what the competitors were doing. And business intelligence is about collecting a bunch of data and then being able to search through that data. So as I mentioned at the bottom there, in the 90s, I probably tested every search engine that was available. I'm also the membership director for the Mass Society of Genealogists, the Middlesex chapter, and I'm also a member of the APG. Okay, so we're all looking for needles, and it gets harder every day to find those needles because the haystack of data keeps getting bigger every day. There's about 10 billion genealogy records online, and it's growing. It's probably 1 million or more records made available each week. I mean, if I just show you a few of the headlines that are being posted all the time, 6 million records added by FamilySearch to their Mexico collection. 4 million vital records added by archive.com. 2 million more records added by archive.com, archives.com. And here's a short list of Ancestry over the last month of what they've added. That, if you don't look at the updated, if you look at the ones that are just new, there's probably 10 million records this month alone. One of the biggest ones there is 400 million records updated for the US city directors. A lot of data. Our first what not to do. Don't panic. I'm going to show you some tips and techniques so we can get through this data. I want you to have a good understanding of what's in an average record, because if you know what's in a record, you know how to search for it. Talking about building your search query. Easier than it sounds. And the ins and outs of different sites that we'll be talking about tonight. I'm going to give you a quick, short history of search engines. You know, the World Wide Web, as we know it, very graphical, pretty much started around 1991. It wasn't long before there were so many sites that you couldn't find them. So they started inventing search engines which would collect the names and links to all the sites, and they would compile them. Here are just a short list of some of those very first search engines. Excite was like the first one I ever used. It was a search engine, but it was also a lot like Yahoo. So it was kind of a collection of stuff as well as a search engine. Quickly along the way came Hotbot. Northern Light was great because it indexed citation type work, Lycos. Then everything changed when DEC created Alta Vista. When they created Alta Vista, what was different about Alta Vista was its ability to do natural language queries, which means that instead of putting in single terms and saying, I need this and that, you just say, how many children did George Washington have? You just spelled it right out, and it would do the work of parsing and try to figure out what you really meant. So what's in a query? You know, if you go back in an information technology point of view, a query is taking a search term and saying, I need this term and this term or this term, and it would be very structured in the way that you built your search to find information. Now, every site today has a different way of taking your search terms and doing what it thinks it should do. It might think, I think I should take those words and do an and. It might say, I think I should try to do an exact. So what we're going to go through is some of the options. You know, some of the sites are going to say, these are going to be exact matches. Or some of them are going to try to do a soundex. So if you put in a name, it'll convert it to a soundex. It'll search by soundex and then return names. It might use synonyms or similar, and you have the ability to take keywords and force them in or out. Where are the records you're looking for? So if you're not familiar with the term, there is the visible web, and then there's the deep web or the invisible web. So the things that are visible are easily searched by Google, Bing, Mocavo, etc., etc. They can find the static web pages, the things that are posted and don't change very often. Things that are like blogs, you know, they will find the surface. The iceberg analogy is fitting. In iceberg, you can only see 10% of the berg. 90% of the iceberg is below water. 90% of the web is below the surface. You can't see it through standard search engines like Google or Bing. You actually have to go to the actual site. So it might be go to Ancestry, go to FamilySearch, etc. You have to go there and use their search tools in order to get to that data. And mostly it's because they own the data, they want to get a revenue for the data. Another piece of deep web that you can't see is any kind of site that creates information on the fly. It creates dynamic content. So you might have to go to the site, put in some information, hit search, hit go, and it will build you a web page when you get there. Because it's building a dynamic page, Google can't capture it because it was only there for a second. While you were looking at it, you're done looking at it, it's gone. Now, it's important that we go into any kind of search with our eyes wide open. You know, there will be errors in data. Most of what we're seeing are physical documents that have been transcribed in some way. So they either were machine transcribed or human transcribed, and guess what? Machines make mistakes, humans make mistakes. There's going to be transcription errors. There's going to be translation errors. It doesn't matter how many times the enumerator went to the house. The person in the house said, my last name is Brillante, and the guy kept writing Berlandi. You know, so it all depends on what the enumerator might have heard. And also there's the error of omission. What wasn't put on the record? Understand that just because there was a field for a maiden name doesn't mean it ever got filled in. So we also want to understand what's available on each record. So think about the records that we typically are looking for. We're looking for census records, birth records, death records, marriage records. If you've got a if you're looking for a birth record for your grandmother, nowhere on that record are you going to find her spouse. The only thing that's going to be on that record is her first name, her parents, hopefully her parents' first names, hopefully their last names, birth location, birth date. And that's all you're going to find. So if you try to search for more than what's on a record, you're probably not going to find the record. Another what not to do. Don't be fooled that searching is easy. I've found that I have to really stick to it, be very tenacious, try lots of different things to find the record that I need. Someday maybe it'll be easier. If we look at Ancestry, can I get a raise of hands here who uses Ancestry? Pretty much more than half the room. So they've added in the past year or so tips. So if you put in something in a tree, it's going to give you a tip to what might have more data records. Most of the time, the tip is pretty good. I would say 25% of the time, the tip doesn't belong to my record at all. But I wouldn't put it past Ancestry that in the next 10 years, they're going to have a big button that says, click me to build your tree. Click, and it'll just assemble all the tips, right or wrong, just to make it easier for the people who aren't comfortable with doing the research. So I'm a little leery of being able to just create your genealogy like a building block. Again, be tenacious, or like I talk about my kids, be a dog with a bone. Get something in your head, don't let it go until you find it. There will be a time to give up. I look at it like the 80-20 rule. You can get 80% of the way with 20% of the effort, but in order to get the other 20% of the way, you've got to put in 80% of the effort. Now, I do a lot of genealogy research, and I have a pattern that I like to use, and I pick a subject. So I like to do famous people, celebrities, and I like to find out how they're related to my family. So what I'll do is, let's just say last night, family and I, we watched Planet of the Apes. My kids have never seen the original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston. I'm sitting there, we're watching it. My daughter always has her phone in her hand, and she's looking up Charlton Heston, and she says, his real name is John Charlton Carter. I said, that's a great name to do some research on. So what I'll do is I'll take the name. The very first thing I might do is I'll put the name into Wiki. Now, Wiki's great because it likes to do early career, early life. It sometimes will list parents' birth dates. It's a great place to start. If I can get to the 1930 census, and in a couple of months, if I can get to the 1940 census quickly and easily, that's where I'm going to start. If I can't get to the census, what I'll do is I will use city directories, birth, marriage, death records. If you've got a good source, and Ancestry has a good source of city directories, you can find them in the 50s, you can find them in the 40s, and start working your way back to the 1930 census. In the worst case scenario, I'm down at the Mass Vitals, and I'm pulling physical records to get me back to, and it's if they're started in Massachusetts, but to get me back to the census. So then I'll get to the census, I'll start collecting the census records backwards, military records if I have to. Now, as I grab a individual, typically on a census, you've got dad's first name and last name, you get mom's first name and last name, but it's her married name, not her maiden name. So then I'm going to jump out to more birth, marriage, death records, probably on FamilySearch, and I'm going to use FamilySearch to find her maiden name. Then I can start working backwards from them. And then it's just an iterative loop. Keep going back through the census, keep going out to a birth, marriage, death. At some point, I'm going to run out of these things because the last good census for this is 1850. Prior to 1850, you've only got head of household. So somewhere around